Nice to meet you, Nirupa.
You too, Aniruddh.
Nice to meet you, Frederick. So, I think as an animator and a filmmaker, I'm just going to start off with the things that really interest me. So I wanted to ask you guys to start off with, how did the process of making these films begin? So if Nirupa, you can go first. How did you conceptualize the film and what were the first steps to making this a reality?
You can hear me, right? Okay. So I'm actually not a filmmaker or an animator. I'm usually a 2D artist. So this was my process for making this film is literally a beginner's process. So what I learned from this was that it's quite different to making a non-animated film, where my experience was that the process was quite linear, where everything had to be kind of done step by step, as opposed to if you're making another kind of film, you might go and write the script, but then you shoot a whole bunch of things, and then if you need to reshoot something, it's still possible, or you can edit and make a lot of decisions after the fact. Whereas in this, we had to kind of write the script, and then since I worked with other animators, I wasn't the animator myself, I did the background art. But the animators had to kind of come up with an animatic, which is a rough version of the entire thing, so we see how it flows, and then we sort of have to settle on that, and then move towards doing the final version of it, and then you do record the sound accordingly. So everything was quite step by step. Yeah.
No, not just that, how come you chose this story and these characters and this setting? I would like to know a little bit more about that as well.
Cool. So I'm a botanical artist, so basically that means that I paint plants. And I had done these 2 books which were based on the flora of Western Ghats prior to this. One of them was the trees of the Western Ghats, and the other one was directed more towards children, or even adults who are childlike in spirit. So we featured a whole lot of species that we are called charismatic in scientific terms, but it basically means that they're exciting in some way, like carnivores, parasites, flowers that smell like rotting flesh, which are all local to the region. And we wanted to get people interested in plants, essentially. One of those plants was these nutmeg swarms that we featured here. And it was, we had 2 spreads in the book that were dedicated to the swarms because they were just so interesting. And I wasn't quite done with it, that subject afterwards. There was just so much, which I guess we'll have the chance to discuss further, but there was so much in just that one species, and I wanted to bring that landscape to life. So animation, literally animated in that sense. So all of the species and everything that you saw in the film are actually native to that region and should be, scientifically accurate, more or less. We actually went to the swamps and sketched them on site, and even the layout of the swamp is accurate to how it would be in person, in the sense that the swamp-dependent plants are closer to the water, the swamp-associated plants are a little bit further away, and then it blends into evergreen forest as you go outward, and you can correlate that to real life.
That's awesome. It's very rare to have something that pays that much attention to detail. How come you chose animation as the medium to explore this? Like you said, you wanted to see it animated. How come not taking videos and putting it together?
Well, I'm an artist, so. But also I just thought that it would be more sort of exciting to see all of the animals as well. We didn't want to have most of the typical animals that are featured in, elephant, tiger, those kinds of things everyone knows about. But we chose a lot of either unknown, or even a lot of them were endemic, which means that they're not found anywhere else in the world. So we concentrated on showing those species, and we thought it would be really cute for kids to see those brought to life.
That's awesome. And I guess it also enables these huge time skips and seeing different things. Frederick, hi. I wanted to ask you kind of a similar question. The narrative of your film is quite a heartbreaking piece of history. How come you ended up choosing that as the point of your story, and how come you decided to animate it?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's actually interesting because yeah, as you said, it's a very hard topic, and it's a critical topic also of our yeah industrial of the beginning of the industrial era, and especially focuses on Europe. And as I um, spent quite some time with my grandparents in France, and always lived in this very old house. I found that this fireplace I really loved as a kid somehow had a connection to this topic, you know, that probably not a lot of people know that the way of cleaning those fireplaces had like a very dark side to it. So like a side of abuse and yeah, slavery and the misuse of children. And so that came later to me, and I found in a very old book interviews about that and very much facts that I didn't know. And so what I did is like I really took this story that happened way before I was born and edited a story in a way you would edit a documentary and found a voice of someone who would read it. And somehow I started making a film out of this story. And animation was the best tool to give this edit of sounds of a narrative an image, because there's actually no footage. Somehow you can find some images when you look in history books, but they are never really showing the work inside of those chimneys, of those fireplaces that had to be cleaned, because also the camera wasn't really invented at that time in a way that you could like put it inside of a place like this that is so dark. And so it seemed like the right art form of showing an image coming from this dark information and from this history that was turned into a story. Also, you know, with this bird that has a very, yeah, almost poetic element to this dark topic. And so we had to invent also a new character, the character of this bird that was meeting up with the kid. And so animation seemed really the best way to do that. And since I had some experience working with animated documentaries already, so I could really dive into that and also choose this like very yeah personal and unusual image style with the pencil that also uses like the coal that you can find in the chimneys.
Of course, it's a beautiful piece. Yeah, so you both have really fantastic images as well, but they're kind of very rooted in reality. So I wanted to ask you, starting with Fred, about the process of research for this film. You've got like, it's kind of, as I understand, it's based on the testimonies of real people. And like, how did you collate that? What parts did you choose to keep? What did you choose to leave out? And could you just walk us through that?
The research, yeah, as I already indicated, is the it started with a book or like with the fact that I was wondering about what happened in those fireplaces, and it was documented very well in a book that is done by a researcher, and it's from the 80s, and it's you can also find it in the film credits. It's very interesting that I found in this book kind of an interview format, and I believe it came from police records or from judges that were talking to those people. And it's kind of an interview format where you can really have questions and answers from those chimney sweepers, from the masters, from the ones who were like the abusers, if you want, even though they didn't really know it at that time. So it's kind of a psychological element that was really inspiring me to make this film there, because you can really see they were just doing or believing they were doing the right thing, but actually it was very, very abusive. And so you could really see that someone was asking a question and there was a long answer, and I took this for the story. So it was kind of the backbone for the story, and it was done in a way you would call it like an interview today, yeah. and still in like this scientific book where you can find all the other information too. And I left out some parts, of course, and I focused on the psychological element of it. So that really tells you about when do you really know that something abusive happens. So it was like really
And
getting the focus.
yeah, and the fact that they were most of these masters were people who went through the same process themselves. It makes for a very interesting narrative, and it's compiled really nice. It's compiled really nicely. Nirupa, your experience as a botanical illustrator, and you've published numerous books, all of which have like kind of deepened our understanding of the natural world around us. So how did you approach this narrative and the research involved for it? Like, or was it like you already knew what needed to be covered, or?
No, there was like so many different aspects through which we approached this plant. Because I think so for instance, when I did this other book, which was on trees of the Western Ghats, we developed this method because essentially we started on it because those trees were really tall. They were like, 140 feet tall. So they're really difficult to photograph. So the ecologists who were working with them couldn't photograph them. They wanted to visually document them, but they were unable to photograph them because they couldn't fit in one frame, and it's also too dense, the surroundings. So we had, that's why I ended up painting those plants by looking at them on site. But we had still approached them only through this kind of ecological lens. When I looked at Myristica, which is essentially wild nutmeg, so the swamps are named after this species which dominates that landscape. So it's related to the same nutmeg that we eat. It's just a wilder version. And there were so many different aspects of this one plant which were not just ecological but also social, in the sense that these are sacred groves quite often. The Myristica swamps that remain are treated as sacred groves because obviously the local community understands the value of the watershed value of that region. And so you can kind of see that in the film as well, where you see the little girl's ancestors coming back and praying to that tree. So there was the social aspect to it as well, and there was also a kind of paleobotanical aspect. So so basically the Myristicaceae, which is the family that Myristica comes from, is one of the oldest surviving flowering plant genuses on Earth, and its evolution is considered to parallel the evolution of the Indian subcontinent itself. So you can date it back to the breakup of Gondwana land, when India was moving towards its current position on the map. So it's just such a fascinating story for this little girl to go back in time and see all of that and understand that it's not just a stupid seed, as she calls it. You packed into that one seed, there's like so many different stories and timelines and everything, and it takes that long for something that valuable to evolve. So that's why we wanted to approach it from all of these different perspectives, and we had a research team that worked on it. If you all want to read about all of the background research that went into the film, we have a website which is called hidden-kingdoms.com. It actually has sort of all of the research that goes behind even my other books, but this film as well. There's a Spirit of the Forest exhibit, so you can read about all of this in detail there. It's quite an interactive website, so it's appropriate for kids as well.
That's awesome. Hidden/kingdom.
Hidden-kingdoms.com.
Okay, awesome. So, also like you mentioned, we see this through the eyes of a child. Both of your films have that in common. So I wanted to ask, was that tricky? What kind of filmmaking choices do you end up making when you're seeing the world through the eyes of a child? Is that something that was a big part of your choices?
Yeah, I think we wanted to show how the child's views on that seed evolve through the course of the film. So initially, if you see, she's quite brash and careless, and she doesn't think much of it, and then she goes through an evolution as she travels along with the seed and its history. We thought that children are actually open to change in that sense, so we thought that they would be a good carrier for that message. So even if adults watch it, they might feel similarly.
Yeah, And she's an awesome protagonist. I love how she doesn't immediately start she doesn't fall to her feet in reverence the moment she meets the spirit. Like she knows what she's about.
Exactly.
The same with, in a sense, almost exactly polar opposite with your film. But it's still through the eyes of a child. Like, did that affect your choices in terms of shot composition and all that a lot? Or did you ever consider seeing it through the eyes of the adult who's, the master at some point?
It kind of turns into the master towards the end of the film. So there's kind of both, because the kid grows up eventually and you can see it in that way, or you can see it the other way. You can say that's the kid version of the master. So, and since everybody had a childhood, a good one, a bad one, it's your childhood. And so for me, it was also a childhood memory that turns out to be like there's maybe a dark secret behind a place that I romanticized very much and nobody told and nobody knew about what could happen or what could have been before in that very old house. So it kind of also goes away. And I think childhood is a good metaphor for that. So also for adults to watch, and see what happens to you in kind of manipulation, what happens to you in information. And I think it's dark, but I think it's true that this would be the right point of view for the film, and it kind of also, oops, I have a sound here, so sorry. It kind of is in the original story also implemented. So it basically the master tells about his own childhood, but he really doesn't realize it. So it's kind of an accident that happens to him, and I think that's a very true element to if you're like disconnected to your childhood in kind of manipulation and psychology.
Okay. Yeah. Another thing about your film is that like charcoal it's both a subject and I think it also ended up being a stylistic choice because the style you've gone for reminded me of like the old charcoal animations that we used to see. I wanted to ask you whether it was like a mixed media approach or whether it was purely digital and whether the subject matter influenced it or it was just another choice.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Sorry, do you hear the sound of the phone? Is it very loud? Oh, okay,
No.
perfect. I have a phone ringing here. So the thing is, the chuckle is in basically every pencil, and so I try to really make a lot of tests that really matches what you can find in the chimney flues. So I took some original examples from chimneys I could find, and
Oh, wow.
I put it together, and I made some tests how it would look on paper, and then I would make some demonstrations, and I built some digital layouts that I could then animate. So it's basically a mix. So there's like some paper animation in, but also some computer animation for let's say the bird and from other elements, and then we put them together in a digital composition. So it
Wow.
comes from
Okay.
paper and from the original chuckle, and then it went to the computer in the final process.
Wow. That's a really meaningful process, like using the actual charcoal from the chimney. That's amazing. For Nirupa, I wanted to ask you, you're usually a solo illustrator, right? You do your work on your own. How was the experience of like working with the team? How was it like when you sent out your backgrounds and got your first shots back? Like, was that new? Was it exciting?
Yeah, it was quite a steep learning curve for me. As you said, I've collaborated with people before, but not really collaborated on the artistic process itself. Usually, I collaborate with scientists, but in this case, we had such a large team. So we had a writer, and we're actually 3 directors. So it's my sister, and who is also the writer, Nandini. So she and also Kalp Sangvi, who co-directed the first film, Wade.
Yeah.
Was part of our team as well. So we were 3 directors, And we also had, the animation was done by the same studio that did Wade, Ghost Animation.
Yeah.
So a lot of the same team did all the foreground animations, and I did the background artwork. We also had like a really amazing musician who collaborated with us on the score named Abhi Tambe. And he came with us to the swamps and recorded the sound of the swamps, which was then used in the sound design. And Abhi created a score for the film which used the veena and drums and those kinds of the Indian flute and instruments like that, which we thought kind of derived from the landscape in some way. So yeah, there were a lot of sort of balls in the air.
Yeah.
So it was difficult.
But it must have been amazing seeing things in motion for the first time,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. The first clip we did was the crab moving around.
Oh, nice.
So that was kind of our test clip.
Okay, awesome. And then what about the process of like making film in Kannada? Because you wrote this with your sister and it's also been translated, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we have the same film we have an English version and a Kannada version as well. And I think Lekha is here. She's who voiced the spirit. She might be here. And when afterwards, after we made the film, we went to a few schools as well around Bangalore, and Lekha and I, and we screened the film and we explained the context to the kids, and that was really fun.
Nice. So another thing that happens in both of your films is that I feel like one of the there's a lot of respite that non-human characters bring in. In your case, there's the spirit of the forest that is in the nutmeg seed. And in Frederick, in your film, there are the birds, which are like, you're relieved when they appear. So I wanted to ask what, in your experience of making these films, what non-human characters can do for a story? Yeah, Frederick, do you want to go first?
So, you wanted to know about the non-human character, right? Sorry, I didn't understand the exact question.
No, I said, in your experience, what can like non-human characters do for your story?
Oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah, in our case, it was very important because this is an artificial element. It was not in the original research, of course, because I learned later that this chimney swift, who gave also the name to the movie, is the bird, and the bird is a special bird that lives in those chimney flues inside, and it can only connect to the wall vertically. So it has the feet and cannot stand on the ground, but it has to attach to a wall. And so this is where they build their nests. They build it like attached to the wall from the inside of this chimney. And so they live in these chimneys because, of course, it's very warm in the winter time, so that they don't have to fly away to a warmer place, and so they can stay in Europe cities and build a nest there. And you also find them in North America a lot, and Canada, especially. And you can see that, when you look on YouTube or something for the videos, that like hundreds or thousands of them are flying around and competing for one chimney. So they're like running. That's the beginning of the film. It's like kind of the POV of the animal finding a nest. So, and basically I found that very interesting, that you have on the one side an animal that searches for a home and really wants this place for its warmth and for its coziness, and really is a winner when it gets inside and finds that place. And from the other side of the story comes this kid that is forced into slavery and has to go into this chimney, and eventually they meet together. And so this projection of also the possibility of empathy, and to really see an animal creature that you cannot talk to and that kind of reflects yourself, and also creates this poetry, and builds like kind of a connection, a friendship almost, and a rescue, which is like getting more and more metaphorical in this film, because of course they change in dimensions. The bird gets very big, and the kid becomes kind of attached to the bird. So it's kind of a mystical creature, like you can find it, for example, in mythology or in Japanese animation a lot. You can see like this almost a projection in mythology. And I found that very interesting to create a character from this bird that actually lives in those chimneys. Yeah.
Well, it added a lot. It added so much needed respite from what we were hearing about the boy's life, and I think that's beautiful. Like the bird is, what is the name of this bird?
Sorry?
What is the name of the species of bird?
The name, you mean?
Yeah.
No. Yeah, it's called like the film. It's the chimney swift is the name of the bird actually.
Okay. I had no idea. Okay, that's awesome. Nice. And okay, so in your film, it's kind of the opposite role, right? Like the world is explained to the character through this spirit.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on like?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. So I just wanted a little time to think about it. Sorry to put Fred on the spot. Yeah, I think that essentially, so these swarms, another reason that they're so valuable is that because we have considered them as sacred groves for so long, they're pretty much unchanged by human intervention compared to the rest of our landscapes. So since the time of their evolution, there has been little anthropomorphic intervention. So they're like a museum a living museum of ecological life for scientists to go back and study. So it actually kind of, and the best part about it is that this is through consensus by the community, right? So I think that what the spirit of the forest represents is the spirit of the community and their collective decision to maintain this forest intact and over time. And so the spirit is the personification of that consensus, and she's explaining that to the child. So I think that's sort of the role that.
That's awesome, and it's like it's way more dramatic and exciting than if a teacher were coming in and
For
explaining.
sure, yeah, I hope so.
That's true. So, do you think this could be like a series? Do you think we could see other biomes explained in a similar way?
Yeah, I mean, the sacred groves are found all over India in so many different forms, right? It's not just swamps, it's meadows, it's even water bodies sometimes. So yeah, that could be really cool.
I mean, I hope to see it. It would be amazing. Frederick, one last question for you. As an animator, because I've never gotten a chance to work on a feature, I wanted to know what is the biggest difference between working on a feature versus a short film?
Yeah, there's a difference that I'm experiencing also right now. And I think the biggest thing for me is, if I understand your question right, for me would be that actually when I'm working on a feature like I'm preparing right now, um, there's no way that I can probably animate on it. So it was kind of a thought I had, like if I would do a feature film, like am I still able to do animation at the same time? And I mean, if I would do a feature that is like very very basic and very very artistically connected to what I do, then maybe yes. But it's very few cases that you can do that. So the way I'm doing my other films are probably a little bit different from the Chimney Swift, which comes like a very pencil and very personal stylized film. So that comes like when I make sketches in my notebook, they probably look a little bit like this, and I was very very comfortable making it like very personal, very loose, and not like cleaned up and perfect, and one outline and a fill in, and like a classic 2D pipeline. We didn't have that in this film. And for example, I'm working right now on a film that uses more like of a 3D pipeline, and everything is suddenly a little bit more industry and it's a little bit more serious, and you have to think very different. And for me, it's an interesting learning to change the perspective and find like artistic methods in different aspects and not the animation itself that I can do probably personally, like straight ahead or something like I did in this film with a very small team. So like
That
straight
makes
ahead
sense.
animation would be like a little bit problematic in a feature film, like for example, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You'd be directing teams a lot more than you'd be doing things yourself.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Okay. I think like all my burning questions are kind of done. Do the audience have any questions that you guys want to ask the animators? Can we get them?
My question is, I have like a two-parter question. So first, Nirupa, I wanted to ask, I don't think you mentioned which area the swamp was in, so I wanted to ask about that, and also loved your film. Sorry, I did not, didn't, I always associated crabs as a sea-related species. I never knew that they lived in swamps, so that's something I learned today.
Yeah, so the swamps are most dominant in Uttara Kannada, so North Karnataka, as well as southern Kerala. But it's also, you should read this on the website. It's super interesting to learn about the patches of the swamps that have been found in Goa and a small patch recently discovered in Maharashtra and what that indicates paleobotanically. I won't get into it, but it's super interesting. The other thing is about the crabs is also very interesting because these are freshwater crabs, and towards the end of the film you can see the hornbill bird, right? That's on top of the tree. So that's initially like birds like the hornbill were considered to be the seed dispersers for Myristica because large birds, large seeds. But what had happened is that those birds tend to disperse the seeds quite far away, and because the territory occupied by swamps has contracted, they might drop it on a road, for instance, where it wouldn't be able to germinate. So there's a very young researcher called Shivani. She was only 19 years old, I think. She watched what was happening in these swamps, and they had these freshwater crabs that would take the seeds, and they're covered in an aril, which is like a brightly colored, the yellow seed coat that you can see around. So it takes and it only eats the aril, it doesn't eat the seed itself. So it takes the seeds within the swamp to its burrow, where it eats the coating, and then the seed remains there, where it's actually safe from predation by other animals, as well as quite dry, and that's where it germinates. And that's what you can see at the end of the film. So that's kind of the seed of hope.
And a quick question for Frederick. I think what you covered in your film was how if the child survives, he becomes the master. We see that in a lot of culture where like abuse is justified later on as tradition. So is that something that you wanted to cover in your film?
Yes. That's very, very good observation. Thank you. Um, I noticed actually also that in the link you provided, probably the film is for some reason a little bit short cut. So actually it's 20 seconds or 30 seconds longer, and there's something of the message missing. So if you want to see this, or if you encounter this issue, you can also Google for the Vimeo link that we have, so that you can see the full film. Just to mention it, because there's one important message in the end that is very important for what you said, whoever put the question, is that the master himself kind of downplays the whole situation. He said like, yeah, but it wasn't so bad. It wasn't so bad. It happened, but it wasn't so bad. But before, he was like kind of getting on the way of actually discovering how bad it was. And so you actually nailed it when you say it becomes the tradition, and it is a very, very big issue in many, many ways. So it's kind of a very general um, association that we have here with this film. So you can put it like on many, many topics. And that's exactly what I found interesting about this story that I found in this connection. Yes, thank you.
Hello.
Any other questions?
Here. Yeah.
There's like a couple of hands up.
I'll ask first, I have the mic. So my question specifically, the theme on the carbon and the awareness that we're creating on climate change and some other issues. Whenever I see such pieces of work, and probably for a lot of people, when we see this, we feel like, okay, we have to do something, of course, or we're not doing something. And whenever I see the literature around this, it seems like, the change mostly comes from the policy making and the topmost tiers when you can make those big decisions at the government level. Have you experienced, like it will be good if you can share any where the pieces you have worked on, your colleagues have worked on, that eventually led to some changes in the policy makers, they witnessed and they felt like, okay, we have to do something. And those decisions came out in the like the swamp story, right? Like we have to protect the jungles, we have to protect the nature as it is. Did it lead to some policy changes somewhere? Yeah, if you can share those experiences.
No, sorry. I don't think it's impacted any policy, but on a ground level, yeah, there's, again, on the website, there's an essay written by a grassroots conservationist named Malhar Indulkar, who was the one who discovered the patch in Maharashtra, actually, which is the northernmost limit. And he talks about how he works with the local community to promote organic farming and to help them conserve the swamps as well. So yeah, there's a lot of you said about top down, right? Like a lot of the perspective that we get is from top down change, but I think this is the other way around. He talks quite a bit about how the local communities are trying to preserve these things.
Yeah, hi. My comment would be titled Keeping It Real. I really like both the animated films, and it was really amazing to learn about chimney swifts through your research. I would like to go off on a slight tangent and talk about hostile architecture. We humans inhabit spaces that nature should be allowed to freely flourish in, that I think all of us in the room agree. There's one little thing that really disturbs me, and I'm going to keep it really real. We build these magnificent concrete structures, but right now, outside this window, to my right, Frederick, you can't see it, but there's a window, there are some dead butterflies. Why it's there is because, and this is not a dig at any one particular building, just to be very clear. There are little birds, I think starlings or some kind of bird, I don't know what bird it is, they fly against the glass reflection because they think they're competing with a rival, and they fly and they fly and they hit and they hit and they fall down dead. Right now, if you go outside this window, you'll see some dead butterflies. And that is so disturbing. We think we are so conscious and we create these films, and I think it is our duty to our fellow earth dwellers, just like the wonderful film in Kannada, which I really appreciated. It is our duty to speak with them, not direct our ideas and our living systems at them. I just wanted to make that point, and I really learned a lot from both the films.
Is there anyone else with a question specifically? Yeah. Can we get the mic up in front?
Hi, it's not a question, it's just a reminder. It's a question to Frederick, just a commentary. I was reminded of the poem by William Blake, The Chimney Sweepers, the two poems in the Song of Innocence and the Song of Experience. So somewhere I was able to relate to that. So were you inspired by that poem also, apart from the research that you had made?
Yeah, William Blake. That's very interesting. Yeah, he has there's an exhibition right now, even here in Germany, in Hamburg, where I live. This is just a coincidence, but it's very nice because here William Blake also made a lot of illustrations and drawings, and so yes, I was also very happy to learn about a lot about William Blake and about this poem and the opera. the chimney sweeper, it's actually called. It's part of an opera that also works for younger audiences. So there was a big inspiration, I thought, to say, yeah, why not making a film about this very special topic that we don't have any connection anymore today. So when you show this film to children, they probably don't really know what the problem is, but somehow maybe they do. So there's like this way of, you don't practice anymore anything work related like this. You don't have chimneys anymore, and you don't know about cleaning them. And this, it's something interesting. It's so much from the past, it feels, but still it's relatable. And I thought William Blake also kind of makes a timeless approach on this. Yeah.
Panel. Thank you so much, Frederick. Thank you so much, Nirupa.
Thanks, Frederick.
Thanks, Science Gallery and BIC for having us.